morning, everyone. This is Sarah Berman, and you're watching Practically Writing. Today we are going to be talking about writing other characters. And when I talk about other characters, what I'm talking about is characters that are often ignored or left out because they are the kind of characters that the author may or may not have personal experience with. This includes characters of minority races and characters who are LGBTQ, etc. And in a lot of cases, characters who are other gendered from the author. So we will be talking about how we can create characters that are authentic and respectful of those groups without necessarily having personal experience with those things. Before we get started on the topic, I would like to apologize for this vlog being a whole week late. Yes, I'm aware of it. There were actually reasons. 3 of them, in fact. The first reason is that I got a sunburn, a really bad sunburn. It blistered, it peeled, it popped, and it was very difficult for me to actually wear clothing that rested on my shoulders. So rather than show up naked and give you guys the wrong idea, or is it the wrong idea? I decided to wait until my shoulders healed up. The second reason is that I have just been completely overwhelmed with a lot of the authoring things that I've been doing. I just released Her Favorite Mistake under the pen name Lena Grace, so that was a lot more effort than I was anticipating. It just ended up that something had to go for at least the time being, and this is one of the easier things to put off. Unfortunately, that's how it goes sometimes, and I promise to try not to overschedule myself again. On a similar note, I got an email the other night that was the contract from the publisher to take on the publication of Fluffy Bunny, the sequel to Too Wyrd of the Rune Spells series. Now it's officially a series! That should be coming out sometime, I believe, around November. So keep an eye out for various tidbits of information that I will pass on as that comes about. The third reason is that my husband has graduated from school. Yay! And he started a new job 200 miles away. So I have had the children out of school by myself for going on 2 weeks now while he works and looks for a place for us to move into. It looks like we're actually going to find out about a place tomorrow, so hopefully we're going to be getting that taken care of. Obviously, because of the distance, there's a lot of planning and back and forth and negotiation that we've had to do in order to make sure that we get a good house for us to live in. We kind of powered through that, and that took up a lot more time than we could have imagined. But hopefully we will be done and moved. Okay, I'm going to state the obvious. I am white, and I am cishet, and I am female. I do not belong to a whole heck of a lot of minority groups. Specifically, I do not belong to a lot of minority groups that I'm going to be talking about. Please understand that I'm trying to explain ideas in a way that is both respectful and clear. I guarantee I'm going to be a bumbling mess by the end of it because this is a sensitive topic, and in many ways I, as an ally, am hyper aware of all the ways that I can mess up, including ways that I don't even know are messed up. I hope that everybody does take this in the spirit in which it is intended, which is respectful, helpful, and encouraging to create characters of diversity, as well as understanding that in many ways, by not specifying or clarifying non-white, cishet, and even male perspectives, leads to a certain assumption that that's what the characters are. There has to be a certain amount of boldness that can be intimidating and nerve-wracking, and there is always going to be somebody who doesn't like how you do it. And I don't know what to say about that. You're not going to be able to please everyone, but my personal belief is that it is far more important to bring more variety into our characters than it is to either try and please everyone or avoid confrontation at all. Now on to our topic. This is probably one of the most discussed topics in author groups. How to write XYZ if you're not XYZ. It covers everything from male writers writing female characters, female writers writing male characters, straight characters writing LGBTQ, etc. characters, white authors writing people of color into their books. I think the biggest tragedy of the situation is that it is so incredibly daunting an undertaking that many times authors simply don't write those characters. And that means you have a lot of authors writing characters who are just like them. I think that this is kind of a tragedy. I personally do make a conscious effort to guarantee at least one character in all of my work that is other. I fail sometimes, particularly in short stories that, you may only see one or two characters. That's, it's hard to get variety when there's only one person in the book. I do make a conscious effort to make sure that there is more representation in my works than what I've seen a lot of. And obviously that is my own personal experience. The fact that I haven't read a lot of books that have lots of variety in characters doesn't mean they're not out there. They're just a little bit harder to find. So some examples include Gatekeeper, which is a short horror, and it features a character who is a woman of color, specifically Hispanic. Too Wyrd actually has Nicola, who is mixed race, Joseph, who is a gay man, and Hound Dog, who is gay and homeless. I think one of the saddest moments of my marketing career is the time when I had to explain to somebody that my gay characters in Too Wyrd didn't die. They weren't tragic characters. They weren't expendable characters. No, the LGBTQ characters weren't the main characters, but I am doing a short story that may lead to further spin-offs featuring Hound Dog, so there's always that. Threadreader, which is the first of the Magus Chronicles, which is another series I'm working on, actually has a character, the main character's brother, who is autistic. Being able to write that in has been, I hate to say it's challenging, but it really is. I mean, it's different from the way that you write other characters. And in a way, it's a lot harder because you have to be aware of certain things. Not only the uniqueness of the character, but also the tendency to stereotype and generalize their quote-unquote minority status. So, like with Eric, the autistic brother, he's not what you would consider a high-functioning or Asperger's autistic. He is a little bit further on the spectrum than that. He has quirks that are characteristic of autism. It's hard to portray that without going into the stereotypes of autism. And so, there has to be a certain amount of uniqueness to the character, trueness to their status, and at the same time maintain a certain amount of respect for both the character and, whatever makes them othered. It's complicated. Probably the most important thing about writing other characters is research. And not just the generalizations and stereotypes that people have about these groups. It helps to listen to people who belong to these groups. Listen to the issues that are important to them. Listen to the experiences that they have. Joining a support group or a civil rights activism group relative to that particular group of people is a really great way to start learning how they see the world and how their experiences differ from your own. One of the big things that you have to remember is to keep an open mind about it and to shut up and listen. That can be very, very difficult because it's very tempting to just walk up to somebody and say, I need to know about your experiences, just start talking to me. That's a lot of burden on them. That's a lot of mental and emotional work that they have to do for your benefit. So it may seem like an innocuous question, but it's really not. A lot of people, particularly in groups revolving around people of color, revolving around LGBTQ+, are also very big into activism and civil rights for their individual groups and others. They're already emotionally exhausted from explaining things to people, demanding their time on top of that. You might find somebody who can do that, but really just take the time, sit back and listen to what they have to say. Read their posts, read their rants, and remember that a lot of what they're going to have to say may hurt your feelings, particularly if you are a member of the privileged group. If you're white and you're trying to learn about people of color, you might hear some things that make you feel uncomfortable. In an LGBTQ+ group, again, you might hear some things that make you feel uncomfortable. You got to keep in mind that it's not about you and it's not about, quote, right and wrong. Their experiences are their experiences. The point is you are trying to learn about their perspective, about what's going on in their heads, so that you can write characters from that perspective. So, in a way, it really doesn't matter what you think about their position, what you think about their opinion, what you think about their politics, or anything else like that. What matters is what they think about those things and what their motivations are. That is the part that gives you what your characters need. And to be clear, I am a raging liberal. I kind of support all of these groups like 110% as much as I can and stuff. And really, I spend most of my time just listening. That's what you do when you're the privileged group. You listen. Once you have a pretty good idea of the real intricacies of a group that is minority or otherwise underrepresented The best way to approach it is to remember that, first and foremost, we are all people. If you're not sure how to write them as you would write any other character. There's a lot of, I think, myth that certain groups are so incredibly different from the white cishet, perspective that it would be impossible to write anything quote unquote normal about them. But people are normal. Most people have extremely similar experiences in terms of day-to-day life. People get up, they cook themselves breakfast, they get dressed, they go to work, etc., etc., etc. Don't get hung up on making characters that are minority and disenfranchised groups so different that you forget that there's similarities too. One of the things that I've heard as a woman participating in conversations about men writing female characters, a lot of male writers think that women are either hyper aware of their sexuality or hypercritical of it. And the truth is, people aren't usually thinking about sex all the time, or their sexuality, or how sexy they look. When you're running around in sweats watching Netflix and, eating pizza, you're not thinking about your boobs. Unless they're interfering with you eating pizza or something. A lot of authors tend to forget that, first and foremost, we're all people. And while we do have differing experiences that can change our worldview, we still have a lot of just peopleness that are so much in common that we don't have to make every character completely different. I think the reason that this is important is when you're writing characters, you want your readers to identify with them. And when you end up so focused on how a character is different, you forget to focus on the ways that we can all identify with them. And that is something that is very, very important, particularly when you're bringing in characters that are different from, the white cishet, even male perspective. We need to create characters that are people first. That being said, this is why the research part is so important. Day-to-day life may be more or less the same from person to person, but there are also certain things that are going to be different. A primary example is, particularly in the United States, a person of color is not going to be reacting the same way to being pulled over by the police as a white person. That is unfortunately the case. A woman is not going to react in the same way to walking down a dark street as a male character. And a person with sensory sensitivities is not going to react to a dance club the same way as a person without sensory sensitivities. Once you nail down those important key differences, a lot of it comes down to an individual's personal experiences. As a woman, I am aware of sexual harassment. I personally do not experience a lot of it for various reasons. Primarily because people seem to think I'm really aggressive. Also, I almost never leave the house. I don't have the same perspective on street harassment as women who experience it on a daily basis. Understanding what the key differences are between certain groups will allow you to build a character that is unique and yet honest to their particular group. So you have to respect the way that a group can react, but you can also make your character unique. There just has to be reasons. Nicola actually has background stories that I've written for character interviews, and it goes into a lot of details of her childhood. She is not as focused on her race as other mixed race people might be, is because she is white passing, or at least Hispanic passing. And that was reinforced very heavily that she be passing by her environment, because where she grew up was actually incredibly racist, and it would have been dangerous for her to exhibit any identification or pride in regards to her non-white status. So there's a reason behind her being the way that she is. The other thing is, because of the nature of the books that I'm writing, the characters who are minority and disenfranchised groups, the books are not about those issues. So while there is implications and inferences regarding these issues, there are hints that those issues exist, but those issues are not what the story is about, and so those characters don't focus on those issues. They're focused on the issues within the books. And since the books tend to be fantasy, usually there's some life or death situation. So they're focused on that. Hound Dog is, he's homeless and he's gay, and that is not a coincidence. LGBTQ youth are far more likely to end up homeless than straight youth. He actually does have a background story, which you can read on my website, that talks about how he was kicked out of the house for being gay. Whether that's addressed in the story or not, whether that's, right up there, that is something that is part of his background. It is something that is part of his characterization. It is something that formed how he is as a person. So even though it's never specifically or directly addressed, it's there. And if you know what to look for, you can see it. The truth is, we all fumble at this. It's hard to write the perspective of a character that we are not. It's hard to do for a different gender. It's hard to do for a different race. It's hard to do for a different species. It's hard to do for a different profession. The reason that aliens are easy is because there's no aliens who can sit there and tell us that we're doing it wrong. But that's not a good reason to leave such characters out of our stories. We talk a lot about developing a rich background and a rich world, and there's entire groups of people who aren't being represented by a lot of these so-called rich worlds, so-called well-developed worlds. And it's a shame, because it is very important for people to be represented. It's important to have characters who speak to our audience across all forms. Right now I have plans for characters with autism, characters who are paraplegic, characters with PTSD. There are so many people in the world who fit into those characterizations, and they never see themselves in media, or it's so few and far between that they might as well not. It is important for us to bring that infinite variety of humanity and of characterization and of personality into our work. Be bold. Be powerful. Represent all forms of humanity. Represent all forms of personhood. Do it. Somebody will love you for it, I guarantee. Just remember to keep it respectful and don't do it out of ignorance. Don't forget to like my video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I have links below where you can buy Too Wyrd. It is in paperback and e-format. You can get Her Favorite Mistake, also in paperback and e-format, available on Amazon. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Facebook. If you haven't checked out my Patreon, you really should. I put a lot of tidbits and excerpts on there. And freebies. Just saying. Please leave questions and comments below. I feel like Bob Ross now. I'm drawing a happy little person. And this happy little person has a happy little friend. A little happy little friend. Happy little trees. Except they're people. They're tree people. I try so hard. I really do. There's people out there.